The Olympics represent humanity's pursuit of athletic perfection. Every 4 years, thousands of athletes push their bodies to the limit, chasing dreams of gold on the world's biggest stage. But beneath the pageantry and pride lies a darker reality, where split-second decisions and human error have transformed these games into scenes of unthinkable tragedy. These are 5 of the most horrifying Olympic disasters that shattered not just records, but lives. It was July 14, 1912 in Stockholm, where the Summer Olympics were in full stride. The Games had drawn over 2,400 athletes from 28 nations, marking historic firsts: the introduction of electronic timing, Japan's debut as the first Asian competitor, and Portugal's first Olympic appearance. Among the Portuguese delegation was Francisco Lázaro, a 24-year-old marathon runner who carried the nation's flag in the opening ceremony. For Francisco, the Olympics represented the pinnacle of a journey built on endurance and determination. Born in Lisbon, he worked as a carpenter and balanced his training with shifts at an automobile factory. Running for SL Benfica, he had won 3 national marathon titles, earning his place in Stockholm. This was his chance to prove himself on the world's biggest stage. That morning, as temperatures climbed, Francisco made a fateful decision. Following a common practice of the time, he covered his body with sweat, a thick layer of animal fat, believing it would shield him from the sun and enhance his performance. The marathon, slightly shorter than today's standard at 25 miles, would push athletes to their limits under the scorching Swedish summer. Out of 95 registered runners, only 68 started the race, wary of the growing heat. Wearing number 518, Francisco maintained a steady pace through the early stages. At water stations, he paused briefly before pressing on. The unrelenting temperatures soon took a toll. 32 runners dropped out as the race wore on. What Francisco didn't realize was that the sweat coating his skin was preventing his body from sweating, while other runners perspired freely, allowing their bodies to regulate temperature. He was unknowingly trapping heat. As the miles passed, his core temperature began to rise dangerously. At the 19-mile mark, Francisco suddenly collapsed. Race officials rushed to his side, finding him delirious and severely overheated. His body temperature had soared to 41 degrees Celsius, a level far beyond human endurance. Medical staff worked frantically to cool him down, but his condition continued to deteriorate. He was rushed to a nearby hospital, where doctors fought through the night to stabilize him. Despite their efforts, Francisco succumbed to heat stroke at 6 a.m. on July 15th, becoming the first athlete to die during an Olympic event. The tragedy cast a shadow over the Games. The following weekend, 23,000 spectators gathered at Stockholm's Olympic Stadium for a memorial service in his honor. The Olympic community, stunned by the loss, raised funds for his widow, collecting the equivalent of $120,000 in modern currency. In Sweden, a monument was placed at the marathon's turning point in Sollentuna, marking the place where Francisco had passed just hours before his collapse. In Lisbon, the impact was deeply felt. A street was named after him, and CF Benfica, one of Portugal's most prominent football clubs, honored him by naming their home stadium in his memory. What was meant to be a moment of national pride had turned into a somber reflection on the dangers of endurance sports. The autopsy confirmed the tragic irony of Francisco's preparation. The very substance meant to protect him had sealed his fate, preventing perspiration and causing a fatal imbalance in his body fluids and electrolytes. His final words before the race, "I will win or die," proved prophetic, though not in the way he had imagined. His death led to increased awareness of heat-related dangers in long-distance running. Future generations of Olympic athletes would benefit from improved safety measures, hydration strategies, and a better understanding of thermoregulation. Yet for Portugal, Francisco Lázaro remains a symbol of both ambition and sacrifice, a man who gave everything in pursuit of his Olympic dream. It was February 12, 2010, at the Whistler Sliding Center, where the ice glistened under the Canadian morning light. Hours before the Winter Olympics opening ceremony, 21-year-old Nodar Kumaritashvili prepared for his final training run. The Georgian luger had already completed 25 runs on the track, yet its reputation loomed over competitors. Whistler was the fastest luge course ever built, and even the most experienced sliders approached it with caution. Nodar had spent years preparing for this moment. He was born in Bakuriani, Georgia, a mountain town where luge was more than just a sport, it was a family tradition. His grandfather, Aleko, had pioneered the sport in Soviet Georgia, building the country's first luge run in 1970. His father, David, had been a USSR youth champion, and his uncle, Felix, headed the Georgian Luge Federation. At 13, Nodar began training under their guidance, balancing intense practice with his economic studies at Georgian Technical University. His Olympic debut was supposed to be a proud continuation of that legacy. Long before the Games began, concerns about the Whistler track had surfaced. Speeds exceeded expectations, with some runs reaching 95 miles per hour, 6 miles per hour faster than originally designed. Josef Fendt, president of the International Luge Federation, had warned track officials a year earlier about the alarming speeds, but the course remained unchanged. That morning, Nodar launched from the men's start, as he had many times before. His sled carved through the ice with precision, reaching a speed of 89 miles per hour. He maneuvered the early turns with control, but as he neared the final curve, something went wrong. His sled wobbled, lifting slightly off the track. In a fraction of a second, he lost control. Nodar was thrown from his sled, hurtling off the track and into a steel support pole near the finish line. The impact was catastrophic. He suffered severe head and neck trauma, rendering him unconscious on impact. Medical teams rushed to his side, performing CPR in a desperate attempt to revive him before airlifting him to a nearby hospital. 50 minutes after the crash, Nodar was pronounced dead, the first luge fatality in Olympic competition since 1975. The news stunned the Olympic community. The Georgian delegation, devastated by the loss, considered withdrawing from the Games. Instead, they chose to compete in Nodar's honor. That evening, during the opening ceremony, the 7 remaining Georgian athletes marched with black armbands, leaving an empty space in their formation. The Olympic and Canadian flags were lowered to half-mast, and a moment of silence marked the tragedy. In the aftermath, track officials scrambled to make adjustments. The walls at Curve 16's exit were raised, and the ice profile was altered. The men's start was moved to the women's position to reduce speeds, though Olympic officials insisted the changes were not for safety reasons, but to accommodate the emotional toll on the athletes. However, the International Luge Federation's later report confirmed what many had feared. The track had been faster than intended. Nodar's body was returned to Georgia, where thousands gathered for his funeral. In Bakuriani, the street where he had grown up was renamed in his memory. Felix Loch, the German luger who won gold that year, had his medal melted down and reformed into 2 discs, one of which was engraved with Nodar's image and given to his family. His death forced changes in luge track design. The course built for the 2014 Sochi Olympics featured 2 uphill sections to slow speeds, making runs roughly 10 miles per hour slower than Whistler. While these adjustments made the sport safer, they came at an immeasurable cost. For Nodar's family and his country, the Games that were meant to be his greatest triumph became a painful reminder of all that was lost. On September 5, 1972, the Munich Olympics had entered their second week. The Olympic Village, designed to symbolize Germany's peaceful re-emergence, stood in stark contrast to the propaganda-fueled spectacle of the 1936 Berlin Games. But the illusion of harmony would soon be shattered. For David Berger, a 28-year-old American-Israeli weightlifter, the competition had ended days earlier. Though eliminated in the early rounds, he remained in the village to support his teammates, a decision that would ultimately seal his fate. David had grown up in Shaker Heights, Ohio, excelling in both academics and athletics. At Tulane University, he won an NCAA weightlifting title while maintaining honors status, later earning advanced degrees from Columbia University. His passion for the sport led him to emigrate to Israel in the early 1970s, where he quickly made a name for himself, winning silver at the 1971 Asian Games. Engaged to an Israeli student, he was building a future both in and beyond weightlifting. In the pre-dawn hours of September 5th, silence blanketed the Olympic Village, a cluster of low-rise apartment buildings housing athletes from around the world. The Israeli team resided at 31 Connollystrasse, a modest, white-walled complex with balconies overlooking the walkways below. Inside, some shared dormitory-style rooms, while others had small private spaces. Around 4:30 a.m., 8 armed members of Black September, a Palestinian militant group, scaled the perimeter fence and slipped into the village. Disguised as athletes, They carried duffel bags filled with weapons and moved swiftly, using stolen keys to infiltrate the Israeli quarters. The first to sense danger was Yosef Gutfreund, a wrestling referee. A faint noise outside stirred him awake. Peering through the dimly lit hallway, he spotted masked men with rifles advancing toward the door. Instinct took over. He threw his weight against it, desperately trying to hold them back. The struggle was brief but valiant. Outnumbered and overpowered, he could only manage a warning shout before the intruders forced their way inside. The gunmen moved with deadly efficiency. Wrestling coach Moshe Weinberg charged at them, attempting to disarm one of the attackers. A gunshot rang out. He staggered back, wounded, but still defiant. Under duress, he was forced to lead the militants through the building in search of more Israelis. Hoping to save lives, he deliberately bypassed some doors, but his efforts could only go so far. Moments later, he was executed. Yosef Romano, another weightlifter, was next to fight back. He lunged at a gunman, grabbing for his weapon. A second militant opened fire, striking him down. His body was left in the hallway, a gruesome warning to the others. The remaining Israelis, including David, were rounded up, bound with rope, and crammed into a small room under armed guard. In the chaos, David had been shot in the shoulder. His wound remained untreated as the terrorists solidified their control. Their demands were clear: the release of 234 Palestinian prisoners. As the sun rose, the world awoke to the unfolding crisis. Television cameras broadcast images from the village, yet for hours, Olympic events continued, as if the horror beyond the stadium walls did not exist. Only later did officials suspend the games. West German authorities, unprepared for such an unprecedented hostage situation, scrambled for a response. They negotiated, offering the terrorists safe passage to Cairo in exchange for the athletes' release. A plan was hastily devised. At Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base, where the exchange would take place, police officers disguised as crew members would ambush the gunmen. But the operation unraveled before it even began. Determining the mission too risky, the officers abandoned their positions without engaging the attackers. The terrorists, along with their hostages, were transported from the Olympic Village to Fürstenfeldbruck via military helicopters. Upon arrival, the gunmen quickly realized they had been deceived. Enraged, they opened fire. Chaos erupted on the tarmac. One of the terrorists turned his rifle toward the helicopters where the Israeli hostages were restrained. David, already wounded, took 2 more bullets to the legs. Then, in a final horrific act, a terrorist threw a grenade into one of the helicopters. The explosion engulfed the cabin in flames. Trapped inside, David and his teammates perished from smoke inhalation and fire. All 11 Israeli hostages were killed. The Munich Games, intended to be a symbol of unity through sport, instead became a site of unimaginable tragedy. David's body was returned to Cleveland, where he was laid to rest in his hometown. His death led to the creation of the David Berger National Memorial, a 14-foot-tall sculpture of broken Olympic rings, symbolizing the interrupted games. 11 segments represent each of the fallen athletes, one slightly different, honoring David's unique journey from Ohio to Israel. It was February 22, 1992, at Les Arcs, France, where the Winter Olympics were in their final days. Among the athletes preparing for competition was Nicolas Bochatai, a 27-year-old Swiss speed skier and carpenter. Just days earlier, he had reached an impressive 130 miles per hour in qualifying, placing 13th. Now, he was gearing up for his final practice run before the speed skiing demonstration event. Speed skiing, though not an official Olympic sport, had captured attention for its sheer intensity. Athletes, wrapped in aerodynamic suits, raced down steep slopes at speeds exceeding 120 miles per hour. Nicolas came from a family deeply rooted in skiing. His aunt, Fernanda Bochatai, had won bronze in the 1968 Winter Olympics giant slalom. For him, the sport was both tradition and passion. That morning, around 9:30 a.m., Nicolas joined his teammate Pierre-Yves Joran and several American skiers for a warm-up session. They opted for a public slope next to the official speed skiing course, a common practice for competitors testing their equipment. The group had already made several runs, using a small bump in the slope to catch air and adjust their form. The conditions seemed ideal. The morning air was crisp, visibility clear. Nicolas, wearing slalom skis instead of his specialized speed skis, took his turn. As he approached the familiar bump, He gained speed and lifted off, but what he didn't see was the snow grooming machine positioned just beyond the hill. The collision was immediate and catastrophic. Traveling at high velocity, Nicholas struck the snowcat upon landing, his body slamming into the machine's metal structure. The impact was concentrated on his upper body, with his head taking the brunt of the force. The sheer speed at which he was moving left no chance for survival. He suffered massive head trauma and severe internal injuries, dying almost instantly. His helmet, designed for aerodynamics rather than full impact protection, provided little defense against the crushing blow. His teammates, watching from different vantage points on the slope, rushed to the scene, but there was nothing they could do. Controversy soon followed. The Swiss team argued that the snow grooming machine had been parked behind the hill without warning signals. However, Jean-Albert Corrand, Director General of COJO, insisted the vehicle had been moving uphill with both a siren and flashing lights activated. The conflicting accounts only deepened the sense of tragedy. Despite the morning's events, the speed skiing finals proceeded as scheduled, yet the competition unfolded under the weight of loss, as Nicholas became the third athlete to die at a Winter Olympics. His name joined British luger Kazimierz Kai Skrzypewski and Australian skier Ross Milne, both of whom had perished at the 1964 Innsbruck Games. Tragically, Nicholas's accident was not the first of its kind. 4 years earlier, during the 1988 Winter Olympics in Calgary, Dr. Jörg Oberhammer, an Austrian ski team doctor, met a similar fate. While skiing recreationally, he collided with another skier, lost balance, and was pulled under a snow grooming machine. The vehicle, in motion at the time, ran over him, causing immediate fatal injuries. Despite safety measures implemented after Oberhammer's death, Nicholas's accident proved that such tragedies could still occur. For the Olympic community, the accident underscored concerns about athlete safety, particularly on public slopes during competition periods. The fact that Nicholas had been skiing recreationally, rather than in an official training session, raised questions about the precautions in place. The tragedy played a role in speed skiing's exclusion from future Olympic programs. Nicholas left behind a wife and 2 young children. His death resonated deeply in Switzerland, where he had been the national speed skiing champion in 1991. The loss of such a talented athlete, especially one from a family with Olympic ties, struck at the heart of Swiss sports. It was August 26, 1960, at the Rome Summer Olympics, where temperatures soared to 104 degrees Fahrenheit under an unforgiving Italian sun. Among the competitors was Knud Enemark Jensen, a 23-year-old Danish cyclist preparing for the grueling 62-mile team time trial. A rising talent, he had won the individual cycling Nordic Championship earlier that year. His ties to Olympic greatness ran deep. He was married to the niece of former Olympic gold medalist Henry Hansen. The Rome Olympics proved brutal for endurance athletes. The time trial course stretched across mountainous terrain with no shade, forcing cyclists to endure relentless heat for hours. Even before the race began, concerns swirled about the extreme weather conditions, yet 68 cyclists lined up at the start, determined to push through for Olympic glory. Jensen and his Danish teammates maintained a steady rhythm in the early stages of the race, but the heat soon took its toll. One of their teammates collapsed from heat exhaustion and dropped out. Under Olympic rules, all 3 remaining Danish cyclists needed to finish for the team to avoid disqualification. The pressure mounted as they continued their punishing ride. With just 5 miles to go, Jensen began showing signs of distress. He told his teammates he felt dizzy, his movements growing erratic. One of them doused him with water in an attempt to cool him down. For a moment he seemed to recover, but when they let go, he collapsed. The fall was devastating. Jensen struck his head on the pavement, fracturing his skull. Emergency personnel rushed him to a military tent near the finish line, but conditions inside were even worse. The temperature within the tent soared to 122 degrees Fahrenheit, offering no reprieve. Jensen never regained consciousness. Hours later, he was pronounced dead. The tragedy quickly sparked controversy. The Danish team's trainer, Olaf Jorgensen, admitted to giving Jensen and his teammates Roniacol, a vasodilator used to widen blood vessels and increase circulation. This revelation fueled widespread speculation about possible amphetamine use. However, initial autopsy results found no traces of drugs in Jensen's system. The full autopsy, conducted by 3 Italian doctors, was never made public, adding to the mystery. Years later, One of the doctors claimed they had detected several substances, including amphetamines, but this was later denied by authorities. Official reports from both Danish and Olympic officials attributed Jensen's death to heat stroke and the skull fracture from his fall. Beyond the immediate controversy, Jensen's death had lasting consequences. In response, the International Olympic Committee established its medical commission in 1961, laying the foundation for modern sports drug testing. By 1968, both the Winter and Summer Olympics had implemented formal anti-doping measures. The military tent where Jensen spent his final moments became a symbol of the inadequate medical facilities at major sporting events. His case highlighted the need for better emergency response systems, particularly in extreme conditions. Thank you for watching. Next, we uncover 5 aviation disasters that changed history forever, where 30,000 feet became a threshold between life and death, leaving behind scattered debris and unanswered questions. Click to watch, and we'll see you there.